Okay, chapter 11, page 84. Had he been trained to function like this? To be cold and calm, to move efficiently without being detected? Had B been trained to be a killer? But where and how and by whom? It made little sense. Though Ian admitted to having paranoid feelings, he did not want to outright give in to conspiracy theories. He remembered reading stories of mind-programmed killers from the internet. Usually, these tales were connected to satanic ritual abuse and the Illuminati, which did not give them much credibility. But somehow in his past had to be the key to unlocking everything. If he could reach and turn that key, then all these things could become clear. He realized that his task had just become twice as hard. His task, okay. Not only he had to bring justice to Lucas, the police certainly could not be expected to handle that. But he would also have to somehow find the truth of his past and his memories. If his flashbacks were to be relied upon, that forgotten past would also include Lucas. Okay, so a forgotten past. Otherwise, if he was not already, he would surely go insane at some point. Otherwise, if he was not already, he would surely go insane at some point. The soul searching was finished for now. During that, Ian had mentally shut off the hangover, but now that the conclusion had been reached, the pain and hammering were returned in full force. But the feeling of purpose, no matter how cold, gave him strength. Therefore, he ignored the pain and the pounding of his heart and dived into the task of getting rid of the vomit at last. First, he showered and changed into gym clothes, which were expendable in case they too got messed in the process. Next, he carried the blanket, sheets, and mattresses out and into the alleyway trash bin. He was wearing only a t-shirt and the gym pants, so the cold air and rain assaulted him savagely. But they felt vitalizing in all their rawness. Of course, he could buy new bedclothes, but decided not to, at least for the coming night. Sleeping on a bare bed would harden his mind. It was not as much self-punishment for drinking too much and messing up his room, but preparation for the investigations that lay ahead. Okay, so investigation. He returned inside, put Slayer and Crater on, began the merciless scrubbing of the floor and all objects that had suffered vomit splashing on or inside them. The simple mechanical task further focused and purified his mind. He noted with delight that thrash metal had not become intolerable for him, though in back of his mind it would from now on be forever associated with the death of Lucas. Finally, it was all done. Even the practice amp and his wristwatch, which now showed 5:30 p.m., theoretically, he could still accomplish much during this day, but was not at all sure how he should begin. In the end, he decided to go out to eat. The irrational part of his mind really dreamed of encountering and interrogating potential suspects. But the rational part just said he had a stomach to fill before suffering total weakness and catabolism. Alexa, look up catabolism.
Cannibalism is the act of eating another human. If you would like to learn more, please say give me more details about cannibalism.
Alexa, look up catabolism.
Cannibalism is the act of eating another human. Cannibals are people who eat other people. Please do not engage in cannibalism. It is both illegal and unethical.
As Ian walked the twilight streets, the cold, misty rain still falling down and soaking his clothes. Twilight streets, okay, cold, misty rain, still falling down and soaking his clothes. He had the distinct sensation of being followed. No, that was the wrong word. Rather, being observed. Likely it was just hypersensitive paranoia, born from his thoughts earlier on that day. And, of course, there were perfectly legitimate, not at all sinister reasons to be observed that had not been there before. He was the second guitarist of Cyberpriest now, after all. Still, he made a note to be extra cautious. If Lucas had been killed because of their infiltration, one possibility, Ian could not outright leave out, he would naturally be the next target. Okay, so he also made a decision. Though it was disrespectful, he decided not to attend Lucas's funeral. He did not really know Lucas's family or other friends. The guy had simply never spoken much of them. Rather, he would pay respect by nailing the killers. Besides, attending could be hazardous to health. Okay, chapter 12, page 88. The next workday did not begin pleasantly. Gwen understood Ian's vanishing act without much drama. In fact, it appeared as if she already had made the connection with the murder. Probably from seeing it in the local news. True to her misanthropic nature. I'll look that up. Alexa, look up misanthropic.
Misanthropic is an adjective that describes someone who hates or distrusts mankind. It can also mean someone who has a deep dislike for people in general. Misanthropy is a strong feeling of dislike or distrust towards other people. Someone who is misanthropic may want to be alone or may want to avoid being around other people. Misanthropy is a psychological condition that can be caused by a variety of factors, including depression, anxiety, or a negative childhood experience.
True to her misanthropic nature, she did not offer much in the way of condolences. Truth be told, Ian preferred it so. However, Gwen was not Ian's immediate superior, but instead it was one Balding Gorman Smith. Balding Gorman Smith. There we go. We have Gwen Gorman Smith. We have Ian. Whereas Gwen was spherically and legendary, Gorman was just average and boring in everything. Looks and personality alike to a maddening degree. Alexa, look up condolences.
Condolences are expressions of sympathy meant to offer support and comfort to someone who is experiencing grief or misfortune. They are commonly said when someone is affected by a difficult event, such as the death of a loved one, or when someone is suffering from a deep emotional pain or mental anguish. The purpose of condolences is to let the person know that you care about them and are thinking of them during their time of loss or difficulty.
Whereas average and boring in everything, looks and personality alike to a maddening degree. Now Ian was sitting in his office receiving first-hand evidence that at least today Gorman was capable of producing some level of emotional reaction, though on most days he was not. Of course, we understand your loss. You could have had a day or two off, naturally, if you just had asked. But becoming completely unreachable for a whole day is something we can't afford from anyone on our team. If we had known, we could have made arrangements, but now Gwen just had to work double duty. Considering how hard she works already, I just don't think that's right. I don't think anyone in this building thinks so. So, though right now I'm not so sure of you. Well, do you think it's right? Ian stilled himself to not answer, to not betray any kind of reaction. Gorman's voice rose in pitch. Damn it, sometimes I just don't understand what's going on in your head. You should answer when your superior asks you something. Gorman breathed heavily for a moment. This was getting interesting. Ian twiddled his thumbs and waited for what would come next. Likely something that would give good laughs after. Leader, you obviously have some issues. A drinking problem, drugs, sometimes your eyes are bloodshot, or otherwise just plain weird looking. If you don't want to be here, it's not like we're forcing you, but since you've stayed this long, I suppose you do. And therefore, I'm giving you a warning, Ian. A most severe warning. If this happens ever again, it's grounds for termination. In fact, Ian would have gladly welcomed getting the sack right now, for that would have meant more time for investigations. Is that all? He asked. That's all. Now, just get out of my sight, Gorman said, obviously relieved that he had managed to deliver the necessary lecture. Ian made it up to the server room. As usual, on quieter days, Gwen was immersed in the multiple console windows on her workstation display, ignoring him. That meant she had no outright pressing task for him. Thus, he began his investigations. Internet searches on Lucas turned up mostly nothing worth mentioning. He was listed as an employee of Raven Consulting. The name amused Ian slightly, for ravens were usually a staple of black metal lyrics, but searches by the company name turned up nothing that would warrant a murder either. Ian admitted to being lost. The impression he had got from conversations with Lucas was now confirmed. He had been a private person and had avoided putting revealing information of himself online the best he could. Therefore, the search had to become more physical. Ian would break in and search Lucas's apartment. But the day was still far from over. Before that, he would have to endure hours in the server room. In the meanwhile, it did not hurt to consult Gwen. Do you think it could have been the security firm because we did that revenge thing? Ian asked. The guard had a gun and was not afraid to kill. Gwen stared at him coldly. Gwen, you should leave those questions to the police. But you know, these days the cops are as good as nothing. And I mean, if it was those security fuckheads, they could be after me next. Gwen's expression softened just a bit. Well then, consider that the exploit came from the securities firm's IP address. Someone there is a wannabe hacker hothead. So they themselves are very aware of being guilty and know they deserved what you did. We already went over that. Then consider that I erased the security recording that had you and your friend on it. Lastly, consider that the club was a place he did not normally go, right? Yeah, he practically only went there with me. But this time he had come to watch you play. How did you tell him to come to the club? By phone? No. We met in another bar and told him there. So that rules out phone surveillance, which would have been unlikely in itself. All these things considered, I think the security firm had nothing to do with it, Gwen concluded. That means I'm not in danger. ? I didn't say that. Ian thought hard. The security firm would have been too obvious, too easy. Somehow he had the nagging feeling that the reason for the killing went much deeper than a harmless prank. There was also the option of no reason at all. Random violence. That felt even more unsatisfying. As the final hour of the mostly quiet day began, his phone rang. It was Renee. Knowing that personal calls were anathema to Gwen, Alexa, look up anathema.
Anathema is a rock band from England. The band was formed in 1990 in Liverpool by brothers Vincent and Daniel Kavanagh, Jamie Kavanagh, John Douglas, and Darren White.
Knowing that personal calls were anathema to Gwen, Ian went to the storage room to talk. Okay, so they're in the storage room. Spare hardware, parts, and software packages filled the shelves from the floor to the ceiling. And the odor, there was an acute lack of ventilation, reminded of his apartment. Ian, I know it's still too soon, and I feel wrong to ask, but would you be up for a rehearsal? There is possibly a small tour coming up, and we should get at least one proper war metal song done. Ian considered Renee's words, laughing inside his mind. Of course, a normal person would assume that another normal person would still be consumed by sorrow and therefore unable to play. However, he had by now established to himself that he most certainly was not a normal person. Of course, he could play along to get time for his investigations. He would have liked to search Lucas's place tonight. It would be easy to pretend he was indeed still stricken by grief. But something warned him away from doing that. Burning bridges, karma. Yeah, I think I'm able to come, he replied. Contrary to what Ian had felt the day before, the idea of a rehearsal felt almost refreshing. Of course, in his changed state of mind, there was no great passion for anything else than his investigations. It was possible his vision had been irrevocably lost. Alexa, look up irrevocably.
Irrevocable means something that cannot be reversed or undone. Something is irrevocable when it is set in stone, meaning that it cannot be changed or cancelled. For example, once you sign a contract, you are bound to the terms of that contract and cannot cancel or change it.
But in any case, it would be a welcome distraction. For being immersed day and night solely in the mystery of Lucas's death would get unhealthy soon. However, as soon as he got inside the rehearsal room, he understood he had made a mistake. Okay, so they're in the rehearsal room. He made a mistake. Eric got into a mad rage. We have Eric here. As soon as he saw Ian, okay, and stood up from behind his drum kit. Okay. Was it a drug killing? Was your friend a fucking junkie? We didn't even get to play 3 whole songs, all because of him. Fuck him, fuck you. Why did you have to bring him along? He shouted. This was too much for Ian. Red hot anger flashed before his eyes, and he took a long step toward the drum kit, ready to kick Eric's ass. Eric was physically much stronger, before Ian could finish this mental evaluation of his chances, Renee was in between them. "Stop," he said simply. "We don't fight in here. Eric, in the name of the black fucking goat, there are some things you don't ever say to a fellow metalhead, and especially not to a fellow band member. You just crossed several lines. Now fucking apologize." Ian felt like disconnecting from the immediate reality. Like Gorman's lecture, this was turning too funny. He observed one part of him still fuming angrily, wanting to get Eric's throat. But on the whole, he was already calming down. The drama was unneeded. So, Eric and Ian. Eric is mad because Ian invited Lucas to the show. Actually, Eric's right for the most part, except Lucas was not a junkie. Ian said, voice trembling. Despite the insulting tone, Eric had cut to the heart of the matter. "I don't think this will be much of a rehearsal, though," Ian added and turned to leave. Now he could finish the thought that had been interrupted earlier. Eric was stronger, but he had cold, methodical expertise. What? Suddenly Ian was scared of himself. Would he have been content with just kicking Eric's ass? Despite the scene just seconds ago, suddenly he did not want to leave. He was afraid to, for outside he would be alone with himself. Here, at least, he had 3 people that would watch over him, each in their personal way, even Eric with his hostility. He turned around to stay, just for a second, his eyes locked with Joe's. She was shaking her head in a weary way that told, been there, done that. It was not exactly empathy, but somehow reassuring. He turned around to stay. Okay, I read that. Surprisingly, as they picked up their instruments and began to play, the tension in the air turned into collective creative energy. Okay. 3 hours later, after a session that was long by their standards, they had one brand new war metal song finished. The first one ever. It was titled, appropriately enough, The Art of Killing, though A Moment of Hate had been the working title. The song contained several sections, some relentlessly thrashing and some slower, but all of them much more involved and technical compared to previous Cyber Priest material. The hit potential was preserved by having fairly straightforward vocal lines in contrast to the music. In the end, it was a combination that everyone was pleased with. When he had been prompted for ideas, Ian had responded in an automatic way. His mind had been elsewhere. But apparently those ideas, for example, twisted minor harmonies on top of standard power chords, had been good enough to be included. They called it a night and packed up their gear. "Listen," Eric began in a rough voice as they were all leaving. They called it a night and packed up the gear. Okay, remember that. "Listen," Eric began in a rough voice as they were leaving. Apology not necessary, Ian said. "I learned something of myself because of your outburst. But like Renee said, I was far over the line. If anyone had said something like that to me, I'd have kicked his butt to hell and back. I'm just saying the next time I go that far, hit me hard. I'll keep that in mind," Ian promised after some consideration. He hoped that if that moment came, he could control himself and would stop at just hitting. And not been a bad evening after all. It had not been a bad evening after all. As Ian walked out of the concrete bunker into the night air, and all of them went their separate ways, he figured how he could make the night even better. He would search Lucas's apartment tonight. Depending on how much it took time, he would be moderately or severely sleep deprived in the morning. But he did not care. After all, Gwen lived nocturnally without much difficulty, and it was constant, not just every now and then. But then, was she on something? However, there were several unknowns. The first was whether he could get inside the building at all. Okay, that's 30 minutes. Chapter 13, page 96.